Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh, and selamat petang pada semua. Good evening to all of my student. So today we're gonna discuss and explain about the chapter 3, or we call it lecture 3. It's about the history and the development of diplomacy. So before this, we already touched on introduction and then the evolutions of diplomacy. And then now we're going to look a bit in terms of history of and the development of diplomacy. And then next session will be lecture 4. We're going to look at the type of diplomacy. And then lecture 5, we're going to touch on foreign policy and how actually the Malaysian foreign policy being made. Okay, so for this chapter today, we're going to touch on the origins of diplomatic in practice. We're going to look at history before century. We have the Rome, how actually Rome delivers their diplomacy, the Byzantine era, and also in middle age era and also modern era. So it has a different type of era and also different type of solution and different type of way how actually diplomacy play his their big role in managing in terms of bilateral multilateral connections between empire to empire, between right, state to state, uh, region to regions, and etc. Okay, and then we're also going to look the rise of modern and contemporary diplomacy. Then we're going to practice a bit, see the practice and also the contribute throughout the history. And also we're going to look at last will be the development trends. So when we look at back at history, so the diplomats being used as a messenger throughout the empire, the cities, for example, it's a for example, if let's say a Roman Empire wanted to send their message or any requirement, so it will use the diplomats, or we call it the diploma. Okay, so in previous history, so diplomat don't have any privilege and also safety in terms of immunity. So it means that if let's say they're being sent to other empire, uh, it is one way trip. It means that you might get killed, or you might you might get to prison for forever of years until you die, or you might safety send back home. It depends on the message that you send. If let's say message that you send were a bit harsh in terms of uh, maybe regarding on war, what, so the messenger might get a bit problem for him to come back safe in their host state. Okay, so that's why if you look nowadays, the difference of, and also all of diplomats, they have their own privileges, which is great, because of the history makes them uh, they have protected in any way, and that's why if you look at the diplomat nowadays, so they have immunities, they also have law border, and they have their specialty and also immunity as the diplomat. Okay, this is because of history. Okay, so we're going to look a bit in terms of history. So if you look at the diplomacy activity, okay, so the first diplomacy activity being recorded were in southern Iraq. Before this is around 200, 2500 before century. So In Greek Empire, in Rome's Empire, so the activity of diplomacy are being widely used, by these two empire. And also in Rome Empire, so he's like a travel document. So they send a message, send their policy, their what actually the buyer wanted to do, right? So these are the work. Okay. So and also it's often used interchangeably with foreign policy, and it is interconnected. It is also part of the foreign policy, but not the same. It means that foreign policy is a document. Okay. And then the diplomacy is how actually they do it. Okay. Okay, in terms of evolution and development, so you have three stages. The first will be we're going to look at the Dark Age. This is before 1000th century. So it is ancient diplomacy. And then we're going to also look at the Middle Age. Starting on Middle Age, the diplomacy had an evolution. So going to modern diplomacy and then a new diplomacy lah right now. Okay. So in history, ancient diplomacy, so we can see that in that age they don't have any uh, organized of some sort of diplomacy. It means that only focus on engaging war or maybe war dispute, and most of the activity being used were almost bilateral, which is empire to empire, and there's not recorded any form of multilateral diplomacy during the ancients, and it has specific agenda. For example, if let's say for the dispute settlement, for engaging war, for going to war, or so that it has a limited and also specific agenda. So not like today, if like say we have a lot of purpose of diplomacy in terms of economy, in terms of culture, in terms of any others, in terms of any others activities that relate to bilateral and also multilateral. Even tourism also, we do have some sort of diplomacy. Okay, but not in ancient, because ancient just focus for survival. They don't have any other things other than to remain safe, remain survive in international system. Okay, and then it is disorganized. They don't have any structures, and it's exclusive. Focusing on tribal rights. It means that focus on their ethnic, their tribes, and for example in Rome, focus on the Rome Empire only. Okay, so we look at the first Greek period, 12th century to 1000 after century. So in Greek period, so it can consider as the old classical ancient thoughts of diplomacy. So being used as a regular system for exchange among city to state, for exchange any information, any documents, and the Congress of Sparta on 432 BC, okay, the concept of common interest and multilateral diplomacies. So this is the first recorded multilateral type meetings during the Greek during the ancient of diplomacy. Okay, so in medieval time, so mainly widely being used type of diplomacy will be the bilateral, and also they have special envoy. So although they are recorded of multilateral type, such as Congress of Sparta, that took place in Greek city, state in 432 before century, the residents and modern diplomacy meanwhile can be tracked back to Europe during the Italian Renaissance. So we can see that the diplomacy during the ancients also had an important role in maintaining peace of empire. So, and then we're going to look at the seven before centuries. So it will be the Delos Conference, one of the prominent conference during in the ancient. So in Delos Conference also many types that they only they also discuss about the diplomacy and also the what task of diplomacy. So in there was conference, so most of the issues uh, being discussed are more politics, because and also they gonna on this period uh, the empire wanted to avoid any war, okay, from happen. So they will use the 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 strategies of diplomacy to prevent war, okay, and in Dalos conference also, so it is a first stages that the diplomats enjoy their diplomatic privilege, okay. So they start concern on the diplomats because many being killed. Let's say they send the best man, diplomat will be the best man for the empire or their cities. If they send the best man to them and if the men don't return, it will affect the state system, right? Because yeah, that's why uh the 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 diplomats, the tasks of diplomacy are very important to the state. So start enjoying diplomatic privilege during the when they are having they sign the Treaty of Talos conference. Okay, so now we're gonna look at the Roman Empire. So in Roman Empire, the international Roman Empire already expand. On this period, the relationship of the empire already expand, and then they have on this period, the empire already make a lot of, for example, empire to empire, they have bilateral, and also they already initiate what we call as international orders, right? So they already have their common law that can be used to all mankind. It's a universal law. Okay, so it is a mixing of Roman law, uh, canon law, which is the church law, and also a feudal law. Okay, what is the canon and also feudal law? So feudal law is a rule regardless of treaty, which means if they have bilateral treaty, so they will follow the laws that stated in the treaty. And then they have heretics. Heretics means the law by the the the, the church, you know, and they also have POW, spouse, also laws that uh, being used by the prisoners war. Okay, for example, any outful act or omissions by the detaining power causing to death, so they have or serious danger the health of prisoners. Okay, they have prisoners of war, and then the last will be the Trucis Trucis law. Okay, so it's another law that were focusing on industrial revenues and etc. Okay, and then on other part also it is a mixing of the canon law. So canon law ni is like it's like the ordinance lah or regulations made by the authority. Okay, for the governments on that period. So, for example, the treaties, for example, war, just war, non-combatant rules for diplomatic agent, and also they have specialists in protocol and also procedure. Okay, so that is common law. So they are mixing that, and then they widely emerge the common law for, so every empires can adopt and also use that law as a general law. Okay, and it actually really help, to the international order. Okay, in international system. Okay, next we're gonna move on the Byzantine period. So Byzantine period on this were the task of diplomat was shift into much more uh, new new activity rather than just sending document, and also and also what become a messenger only, right? So they have three new diplomatic method, which is more to the espionage, more to the spies. For example, the diplomats were being used to seek alliance, and also lay off neighbor, and also to split enemies. So the functions of diplomats being widely expand, focusing on not only in terms of negotiations and also summit report. Okay, and then they also being trained as an observer, not just an orators. So it means that the functions of diplomat become more widely, so being used in decision making to seek allies, to split enemy, the way of the state survival process. They were involved directly for this kind of things. Okay, so if you look at the if we look at back on the dark age, okay, dark age, as we see throughout the Greek period, and the Roman period as well as the Byzantine period, we can see that they have some sort of evolution of the diplomat's task, or the use of diplomat being evolution by the period. For example, before in the first terms, in terms of Greek and Roman Empire, so the functions of diplomat only being used as a negotiation, and also a messenger only send reports, send documents. But yet, when we starting in the age of Byzantine, so the functions of diplomat being expand to any other decision making that would benefit the nation, and also uh, it is contrast in terms of state survival. For example, diplomat being used to seek alliance, to lay off neighbors, and also split enemy. Okay, and then now we're gonna look at the Middle Age. So Middle Age, starting 14th century until 90s. So basically, lot of is during the Renaissance period and the beginning of modern democracy. So system of cities has been brought out. When empire fall down, so the Renaissance happened. So a lot of big cities emerge. So we have Venice, Milan, Florence, Naples, and then when cities happen, they have many treaties. Okay, so the treaties actually ties the trade also happen. It ties the the cities in terms of the trade, economy factors, as well as security. So, and in terms of Middle Age, the functions of diplomacy are much more organized. It is professional, and in 1945, first recorded permanent mission to Genoa. And then on 1496, in Venice, and later Paris and London. So the functions of diplomat during the Middle Age are more organized, more useful, more important, and it's like a state representative. So the qualities and also the privilege of diplomat also being much more strengthened, okay, during the Middle Age. Okay, diplomats were called by different names. Okay, for example, the first is legate. Okay, and then second is commissar and orator. Okay, so legates ni is a governor lah ataupun general using the name being used by ancient Roman plebeians lah for their deputy ataupun is a peacemaking ataupun peacemaker. So I call the person is called as the legates. Okay, and then second commissar. Commissar being widely used by the Soviet party. Is an official communist party. And then on Middle East, commissar also being known as a diplomat. And then the last is orator. Okay, so it is like diplomats is like if orator ni dia macam public speaking lah. Okay, it's a man with skills. So the diplomats also are good in public speaking. So that's why some diplomats were called as orator. Okay, and then they have two general types. Okay, ambassadors. First will be the representative of the state, monarch or sovereign state, and second is semi-official ataupun kita panggil less costly. Okay, for the ambassador, they call it ambassador lah, the main, which is they have powerful power, you know. For example, they can make decision throughout the state, and then it actually will control, and also it's like if they talk, it's like the mission of the state. Okay, and then the next will be semi-official. Okay, so during the Byzantine period, it is about mostly, if you look at the Byzantine period is now, so it's a legacy of power politics. So in Byzantine period lah, the functions of diplomacy being widely using in terms of power, you know, right? For negotiate in terms of power, to seek allied, to get your enemy, to decide who is your enemies, right? So they already include the functions of diplomats in the decision making in power politics. Okay, so it is an honest spy. Kan, emissary has a honest spy. It's a perception, it's a reputation, and also in Machiavelli, book named The Prince, Machiavelli always says that the importance of diplomats as a spies. Okay, but although they are the state representative, but yet they is a honest spy for the whole state. For example, if I'm a Malaysian, so if I'm go to abroad, being service in, for example, in Indonesia, so I'm also can be stated as a spy of Malaysia in Indonesia. Okay, so you like that lah, representative honest spy. So, and also in Middle East, they have two schools of thought lah, in terms of diplomatic theory. The first is the warrior theory. Second will be the mercantilist, apa ni, theory ataupun kita panggil shopkeeper theory, which is soft power lah. Okay, ada tu. Satu hard power, another one will be soft power. Hard power were mainly focusing on the military action. It's an aggressive power. It's a power politic, and it no concessions. It's zero sum game. Zero sum game means we always win. We don't have any agreeable or any conflict, any negotiation, and fear of imitations and also victory focus. Okay, so hard war mainly use war as an engagement. Okay, so the next were the soft power. So this is modern diplomacy. So we use politic consolidations, practical, or we more focus on peaceful, reduce the tension. The civilian will be dominant, and it is a middle ground process. Okay, so we go for seek for negotiation, conflict resolution, any other dispute settled by the between bilateral or multilateral. So this is soft power. Although we wanted to become dominant in international system, but yeah, the idea of soft power means that you want to win without war. Itu sebenarnya soft power. For example, bargaining process kan. We bargain process at the same time we also protect our national interest kan. So itu adalah some sort of soft power. Okay. So now we're gonna start look at the modern diplomacy. Okay, so if we can see the Peace of Westphalia Treaty, 1644-48, it was the first modern diplomatic congress. It ended the 30 Years' War large scale. It is a multilateral diplomatic negotiation and conference diplomacy. Okay, it also a benchmark of the rise of the new world order in Central Europe based on state sovereignty. Hence, also it is the rise of the modern diplomacy. Okay, so on the other hand, French cardinal it introduced modern approach in IR, focusing on the idea of state and also the pursuit of national interest is an ultimate objective. It means that whatever that the state will do in any activity, for example, in engaging to security, trade, or economic factor, first of all, state will always look and protect their national interest first. Then only they can attempt in any occasion. If let's say, in terms of security, if we feel that ASEAN are a better way to promote peace and harmony and expand our economic purpose, so that is our national interest. If we look at ASEAN also do the same way, if we enter the ASEAN, it can protect our national interest, so we can be part of ASEAN. Okay, so any decision that we made by the state are focusing on their national interest. Kenapa? As I said before, the state survival are the main important. Okay, if you remain survive in the international system, if you remain dominant, although you are small state, you are remain dominant in international system, you can survive in any occasion. Okay, what is Conference of Vienna? So it is Conference of European Ambassador. So this is another one conference that are very prominent throughout the nation. This is on the 18th century. So the objective is to settle issue of French Revolution by Napoleon War, and then to the solutions Roman Empire lah. Okay, so result. This is the result of Vienna Convention. So the drawing of the content politics map and also establishing borders of France, Dutch of Warsaw state, and also the German kingdom. Okay, and also various of territory uh, in Australia, Britain, France, and Russia. So uh, it also is a benchmark of the rise of concept of modern state system. Okay, so and then when much more state emerge, the importance of diplomacy are much more important. Okay, bila semua negara dah ada, when every state emerge, become a sovereignty state, and then the importance of diplomacy are become more wider and wider. Okay, bila sebuah negara tu ada, when every state become a sovereign state, they should have a diplomat, right? So if more state appeared, and the functions of diplomats become more important. Okay, and this is treaties of exile and also Congress of Vienna. So in this Congress also, they are also agreed to establish the diplomatic service and representations of this power of an agreed basis. Also, in the status of rule of profession established, it recognized as distinct professional with own rules, procedure, and also conventions. So you can see how importance of diplomatic during the modern era. Okay, in this situation, the task of diplomacy being categorized as four representative. Okay, the first is ambassador. Second will be the ambassador extraordinary. Third will be the minister residence, and the last will be charge d'affaires. Okay, so we're gonna look at these four category. Okay, what is ambassador? Or we call it papal legates. Okay, so it's an official envoy, especially a high-ranking diplomat who represent the state and is usually accredited to other sovereign state. So, or international organization as a resident representative of their own government or sovereign or appointed for a special of and often temporary diplomatic assignment. So, it is a official envoy lah. Ambassador ni, for example, on during the modern war, modern world also being used as a main names for the diplomats. So second will be the extraordinary. It is a sort for not same like ambassador, but yet it is a diplomatic minister of high rank lah. Okay, so it is also being called as a permanent representative to another country or a sovereign country. Okay, the third category will be the resident minister. So the resident of sort is a government official required to take up permanent residence in another country. So it is a representative of his government. So officially as diplomatic function, which are often seen as a form of indirect rule. So permanent resident in other state lah. So being appointed as a minister resident. And the last will be the charge d'affaires. It is a person appointed to act as head of the diplomatic mission in a foreign country while the ambassador is away. Okay. Dia macam kalau if like we look nowadays, if we have ambassador, so we have small which is diplomat lah. Okay. So a charge d'affaires is a head of a minor diplomatic mission in a foreign country. Okay, so this is the four categories lah after the Vienna Convention. And then by the 18th century, after all four terms, and then finally the terms of ambassador widely being used, and the function much more greater, reporting, and it also representations of the nation. It is also considered as advisor of the state, a negotiator of the state, espionage, and everything. So the rise of spread of embrick foreign minister is a spread of permanent resident across the Europe. Okay, so some sort of history lah, the functions, the evolutions of diplomat until new. Okay, so kita nak tengok yang change lah, change character lah. So we want to look at the change in the character of diplomacy from old to new diplomacy. Apa yang kita dapat? What's the learning process from these slides? Okay, so in contemporary times, the nature of diplomacy has undergone big changes. Okay, so from traditional, which is old diplomacy, come acquire to several new features. So this change earned for it the name of new diplomacy. Okay, so apa dia? This is old diplomacy. Kita tengok old diplomacy dulu. So old diplomacy ni is traditional formal. It's known as old diplomacy. It has four main features. If we look at the history, so this is the five main uh, features have been. For example, the first would be the European diplomacy. The second would be the aristocratic. The third will be the special emphasis upon virtues, secrecy, and also freedom of action for the ambassador. So we look at the European diplomacy. So all diplomacy was primarily confined to Europe. So being an imperial content which controlled and ruled the continents of Asia and Africa, Europe was the center of all international activity. So all diplomacy has its origin in Europe and continued till 1914 to handle the relation among the European state. So masa tu ketika itu di Asia not commonly, widely. Okay. So second is aristocratic. Okay. In all diplomacy, the conduct of foreign policy relation was considered to be the prerogatives of the kings or ruler and their trusted ambassadors. So the diplomat used to be selected by the monarch and were responsible to their lords. Okay, so diplomat was conducted by a class of professional diplomats and was categorized by an A and approach. Okay, so they are responsible to their lords lah, king. Kita panggil king. So this is aristocratics. Then number tiga, the old diplomacy. So it's a special emphasis upon virtues. So was aristocratic and hence regarded several well-defined and accepted principles as cardinal principle and also we call it virtues of diplomats. So they have to be honest, integrity, etc. lah. Okay, too many protocols and commitment to their national interest lah were considered to be the essential qualities of diplomat. However, in actual operation, all diplomacy was categorized as honest lies. So has integrity in appearance, qualified truthfulness, outward politeness, and etc. lah. So can be also strict observance of protocol and social secrecy. Okay, the fourth, we call it secrecy lah, was considered to be the hallmark of all diplomacy, kerahsiaan lah. So completely secrecy is respected of the negotiation as well as about the outcome of this negotiation was considered to be a vitally important condition of all diplomacy. So diplomats communicate with only their counterpart in other countries. Secret negotiation leading to secret undertaking, agreements or treaty or alliance were considered to be the ideal way of conducting relation for the preservation of peace and problem solving. The last, the freedom of action for the embassies. Okay, so within a broad limited of agreed policy, the diplomat handling diplomatic negotiation used to enjoy a freedom action. So during all diplomacy era, so ambassador enjoy consideration freedom in matters of negotiation. Lack of speedy and continuous means of communication made in essentially for diplomat stage to give wide power to its diplomat. Okay, so it means that this five summary lah what actually the all diplomacy's character throughout the diplomats. Okay, kita ada 5 lah. Okay, the first will be the European diplomacy, second will be the aristocratic, third will be the special emphasis upon virtues, fourth will be the secrecy, and last will be the freedom of action. Okay, this is the next point. So also in terms of freedom of action, for the ambassador, it is an ability lah to maintain continuous speedy communication. Ambassador always use their authority freely without much fear, and remain operation till middle 20th century, and then after that, comprehensive means lah in terms of transport communication now became to a new diplomacy. So now we're gonna look at the new diplomacy lah. What actually diplomats bring to the new diplomacy. So new diplomacy and decision with old diplomacy. New diplomacy has the following silent features which have been totally different from the features of old diplomacy. We are total lah, sangat-sangat berbeza lah. Okay, nombor 1 apa dia? New diplomacy is a global. Old diplomacy was mainly European. Okay, so new diplomacy is a truly global in the nature of scope. So the rise of Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the emerge of large number of sovereign independent states changed the character of post-World War in international relations. Okay, so from mostly European relation, this came to be a truly international relation involving all the sovereign states. For example, we have UN or everything lah. So this is what we call new diplomacy. Consequently, diplomacy had to broaden its European character and to become truly global in nature or approach. Okay, so it become more wider and more acceptance lah in terms of international relation. Okay, second apa dia? The new diplomacy is mostly multilateral, whereas all diplomacy was mostly bilateral. As we go through, they have some multilateral diplomacy during the ancient or old diplomacy, but not much. But during the modern diplomacy, multilateral is a main stages of diplomacy, and bilateral were mostly being not too frequently being used by the new diplomacy. Okay, bilateral negotiation is an important, for example, international conference, institutionalized diplomacy in the United Nations emerged as a direct personal contact among the statesmen and leaders of various states, and have all combined to give a new look and content to new diplomacy. All diplomacy was mostly bilateral and limited. The new diplomacy is mostly multilateral and also global. Okay, third, new diplomacy is less formal than old diplomacy. So new diplomacy is not much formal and rigid in respect of rules or procedure, as was the case with the old diplomacy. So presently, there exist quite informal and direct contact among the leaders and diplomats of various states. Okay, the less formal, and then the new diplomacy is mostly open, and all diplomacy was mostly secret. As we go through, right, all diplomacy, kalau kita tengok balik, kan ada satu yang saya letak tu, secrecy, right? This is the secrecy. So new diplomacy is not much lah. Okay. New diplomacy, the negotiation are open, the result are public, and after the reaching the agreement or treaties or alliance of settlement, semua kita akan publicize. So diplomatic relations are given full coverage over radio, press, and etc. lah. Tapi all diplomacy, they are favored secrecy as in governing principle, kan? Okay, number 5, democratic nature of new diplomacy versus aristocratic nature of old diplomacy. So the new diplomacy in democratic, whereas all diplomacy are aristocratic in nature. So In the era of the latter, a special elite class of diplomats were professional to the core, used to conduct diplomatic negotiation and also relationship. So, however, at the present, the increased influence of public opinion, political parties, pressure group, world public opinion, the rise of more democratic and less aristocratic class of civil servants have all given a new dimensions and look to diplomacy. So modern ambassador and counselor are democratically in their outlook towards diplomacy. So it's a degree of informality, and also it has come to characterize their functioning in international relations. So it means more acceptance lah, democratic new diplomacy ni, more widely, more structured, more structure and more widely being used. Okay, so they are less apa? Less aristocratic. So number 6, new diplomacy depends more on propaganda than old diplomacy. Okay, so in terms of new diplomacy, the use of propaganda are widely important lah. An instrument of political welfare in international relation, accepted and also used by new diplomacy as mean for securing the goals of national interest that is represented. So all diplomacy was mostly secret and hence avoid the agenda for propaganda. So it's concentrate upon legal and formal communication as the means for conveying its wishes, desires, and also objective. And number 7, under new diplomacy, the role of a diplomat has suffered and declined. So if you look at new diplomacy ni, the role of diplomat ni become more less and lesser lah. So due to the development of technologies, right, transport, communication, it has become possible for the political leader of the state develop to maintain direct contact, continuous and also active contact with the one another's. So the development has reduced the role of an ambassador and also the role of ambassador. And if you look at the old diplomacy, the diplomat were regarded the most important vital link lah kan among the state. So king ataupun presiden dia takkan buat kerja lah untuk connect negara to negara. So dalam konteks ni new politics ni ataupun new diplomasi, the new diplomacy ni because of communication all, so president to president can directly contact, kan boleh contact direct. So itulah yang memberi kesan kepada orang kata new diplomasi rather than old diplomasi. Memang old diplomasi, the king, the empire really relies on the diplomats. Okay, so they enjoy a lot of discretions and freedom of action. So new diplomacy has reduced the role of diplomat and then also the responsibility of diplomat and the control of the foreign officer over the diplomat has considerably increased in this realm or of new diplomacy. Okay, so kita tengok sikit. We look at the future of diplomacy. Okay, before we end our session. So if you look at old and also new diplomacy, so despite changes and also role of functions in evolutions of diplomacy still continues to be valuable instrument. Kalau kita tengok kan, all diplomacy has their own important, new diplomacy also have their own important, and then new diplomacy, for example, future diplomacy become much more lesser important because of the complication and technology being brought out. The prime minister ataupun the president can make their contact directly without using the diplomat, but diplomacy can still continues to be a valuable instrument of international relation, right? Continues to be an important element for both, for example, protecting national power and for the instruments of foreign policy. So a change or decline in its role does not mean that diplomacy is still rejected as an instrument of international relation. Diplomacy in its own new form, the new diplomacy continues to be regarded as one of the most important means of securing nation interests as well as for preserving peace and also against war. Okay, so long as they needed to eliminate or at least to reduce the change of war remains. So diplomacy as a main has a mean for the conduct of relation is bound to be used by all the nations. So with its new dress, diplomacy can be successfully used as a valuable instrument for the resolution of conflict and crisis management among nations. Diplomat can also have been trying to help the international community to overcome some of its problem and to secure a resolution of international dispute. So it means that although the evolutions, we can see the evolution of from old to new diplomacy had a lot of past history, blood, sweat and tears, and modern diplomacy, the function being reduced, but yet it has their level of importance in the international system. Okay, so the importance of diplomats or the agendas of diplomacy are still remain as main important thing to protect the national interest of the state and to protect the state survival, the power of the state, to make the state remain their dominance in international system. Okay, so itulah yang kita nak simpulkan. And thank you for today for chapter 3. And then next class we're gonna check on the task for the types of diplomacy. Okay, so this is from Carl's Cruise. So diplomacy is a game of chess in which the nation are checkmate. So we can see lah how importance of diplomats in international relation. Okay, so itu saja. That's all for the class today. So insyaAllah, I might meet you guys next week with others chapter to be discussed. Okay, so sampai di sini. Terima kasih semua. Have a nice day and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.